Hi and welcome to Supply Chain Secrets for another week. Yes, we have a slightly different setting. We're not in the studio this week. We're not out in the back garden with the lorikeets. Welcome to the inside of my home. This has now become my studio and it's a little bit quieter. This week we're going to be talking about 3 things that I think you really got to be doing in your supply chain right now. Coming up. Okay, so this is a real hot topic. What are the things that you need to be doing in your supply chain right now to get you through this current crisis and out the other side? In fact, we ran a series of webinars on this a week or 2 back. So I'll put a link to the recorded webinar down below, but I can kind of shortcut watching all of that for you. I mean, by all means, jump on and watch the webinar. But really it came down to focusing on 3 things. And, you know, a lot of people are very stressed with their supply chains at the moment. They see stock outs and they see excess inventory on, you know, 2 sides of the same coin, if you like. Customer service issues, very high costs, sourcing problems. So we talk about all of that on the webinar, but ultimately I think it comes down to 3 things that you really got to focus on. So what are those 3? One won't surprise you. That's cost to serve. So I'm always talking about cost to serve. And why is it important now? Well, let me just put this chart up and to remind you of what cost to serve is all about. So on that chart, you can see we are plotting the profitability of customers and products in your business. And you'll see that down at the bottom left, we've got about 10% of orders that are non-profitable, and then we've got some that are marginal, and then we've got some that are profitable, and top right, we've got some that are very profitable. Now, under normal circumstances, cost to serve analysis like this is really important because it enables you to see where you're leaking profit in your supply chain and which customers and which products and what sort of order sizes that you need to tweak to start moving them up that chart to make them more profitable. So in normal times, it's really important. Do you think it's important now? Even more. Because in this environment, we have higher costs, and I talk about this on the webinar, but all the people I've been talking to in industry recently are saying they're getting 10 to 15% higher cost at the moment because of all of the expediting, and they're having to, you know, find extra transport. They might be having to rent extra warehouses. Of course, there are companies at the other end of the scale who are not doing very well, but generally costs are going up, service is getting impacted, and so it's even more important now to understand the cost to serve of your different product groups and customer groups so that you can start to fine-tune the service, and maybe you can detune things a little bit. So, for example, one of the things that we talked about on the webinar was rationalizing the range. So if you go to your local supermarket and say there are potatoes or rice or something like that, and maybe they come in 6 different bag sizes, what you're finding now is that perhaps they're only in 3 different bag sizes. So the big retailers are trying to rationalize the number of products they've got to make their supply chain a lot easier to manage. So number 1, cost to serve, as always, but even more important right now. What's number 2? Well, let's kind of stick with cost and service for a minute. That would be sales and operations planning. Let me just put up another chart. So the normal sales and operations planning process, I'm sure you're aware of it, and many of you I'm sure do it in your business, but it's really a cross-functional communication process. So we're trying to balance our demand and our supply, and there's a series of key meetings that generally happen on a monthly basis, and we go through that monthly cycle, and we're balancing supply and service to really optimize, balancing supply and demand, really to optimize service and cost. Again, that's pretty essential in most supply chains under normal circumstances. Now, absolutely vital. And in fact, talking to a lot of our consulting clients and other people that I know in the industry, a lot of people are now doing it on a weekly cycle. They might still be doing the whole thing monthly, but they're kind of dipping in weekly to make sure that there are no things that, you know, have cropped up that they really need to deal with. So we're calling that fast S&OP. So maybe you're still doing it monthly, but dipping in weekly, or maybe you're doing the whole thing weekly to speed the thing up. And talking to friends in the pharmaceutical sector, they particularly are doing that in a much faster cycle now. So, cost to serve, sales and operations planning. The third one, and it kind of relates to the two, I mean, I could come out with a dozen here, but I'm trying to think of the top three, is probably around inventory. And there it's about a couple of things. Inventory rationalization that I mentioned already in talking about cost to serve. So are there some slower moving, the sort of A, B, C? Let's just put that chart up. So we've got the A lines that generally represent about 80% of your sales, but only 20% of the products. We've then got the B lines, and I've got to try and remember what that one is. Is it about, can't remember, another percent of the product lines and a smaller percentage of the sales. And then the C lines is about 50% of your product lines, but about 5% of sales. The C's are the ones that you've got to focus on right now. A's obviously to make sure you've got them in stock, but C's, do you really need them? Maybe you can actually drop those off the range for the time being. So having a look at your inventory is particularly important so you can rationalize the range. One of the things that we're doing with our consulting clients as well at the moment is to have a look at the at-risk products. So, there might be some really high volume, high sales products that are getting all your attention right now, and that's where all your expediting is going. But are you actually looking at some of the B's that are fairly important, and are you aware of when you could have problems with those in terms of resupply and stockouts and so on? So that's something we're doing with quite a lot of companies, and it's a really neat little tool that one of my team has built where she can actually predict what SKUs are going to be hit next in terms of stockouts. So there we go. I'll put the link to the webinar down below so you can get kind of the whole backstory. But really the three things I'd be focusing on now are that fast sales and operations planning, understanding your cost to serve, and really having a good look at your range. What I'll also put a link down below is that you may be aware, I don't know, but my day job isn't running a channel, a YouTube channel on supply chain. My day job is actually running a consulting business called Logistics Bureau. And what we've done is we've very quickly put together some remote consulting services, which actually focus on those three. So I'll put a link down below as well, and that'll give you a little bit more of an idea of how we're approaching that, and it might give you some ideas. So there's a couple of links down below. What else have I got to remind you? Don't forget to subscribe. Really important if you enjoy these videos, because that way you'll get notified every time we have a new video coming out. So hit the red subscribe, and also if you hit that little bell, you'll get an email every time we send a new video out, and that happens generally on a Wednesday. Anything else? Yeah, comments, questions. I love to get comments down below. So maybe you can think of something else that's just really important right now in supply chain. Love to hear that. Comment down below. If you've got any questions on any of the stuff that we've been talking about today, put those questions down there as well. I answer them all personally. It takes up quite a bit of time these days, but I do love to get lots of comments and questions. So thank you for joining us. If you've got any things that you'd like to know about next week, comment on that too. But before you go, hit the subscribe, hit the bell. We'll see you next week.